بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم آمين. وبعد. We continue with Safinat al-Najah by Sheikh Salim ibn Abdullahi al-Hadrami rahimahullah. I think this is our 15th dars, 14th dars. So alhamdulillah, we've covered a significant amount of the book. And so a lot of what is left right now are very specific details of Salah, which inshallah we'll go over. And we went over a lot of those details yesterday, inshallah, and we'll try to finish some of these smaller details that are left, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Let's see how much we cover. Before I start, I actually want to address two masail. The first mas'ala is related to a question the brother brought up last night. It's regarding madhabs. What is a madhab, and how do we understand it, and should we adopt one? Just a quick, kind of timeline of how Islamic law was developed. The Prophet ﷺ, he taught the Sahaba, right? And his word is revelation, and his rules are final. Sahaba radiallahu anhum dealt with a lot of new masail, new problems that didn't exist during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Foreign countries, foreign lands became Muslim. New technology was invented, new challenges came up, political challenges. So Sahaba radiallahu anhum had to use what the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught, and had to apply it to these new instances and new experiences. And so they had their own opinions and interpretations based on what they understood. And then they taught it to the younger to the next generation. Those generations had the same thing. They had their own opinions, they dealt with new issues. And then the four schools came. The four schools, what makes them unique is that there were a large body of scholars dedicated to the teaching of one imam. And so they codified the teaching of that imam and developed his writings and his methodology, his principles, his method of interpretation, and so on and so forth. And they codified it, and that became known as a madhab. It's like an institute of studying Islamic law. And so there were countless, hundreds of madhabs, because a madhab is, at its root core, is the teaching of a specific imam. That's what it is. It's the way this scholar taught. There were countless, hundreds of madhabs, but out of all the madhabs that existed, Ahlul Sunnah preserved four, and these four were passed on, codified, maintained, and developed as time progressed. Generation after generation, people were committed to them. Political governments adopted them as well. Right? So the Uthmani government, for example, or caliphate, took the Hanafi school. In Egypt, they adopted the Shafi'i school. In other parts, governors adopted the Maliki school, Hanbali school, and so on and so forth. So that's how the madhabs developed. And so when the scholars study fiqh, they don't just study the Quran and Sunnah, because to study the Quran and Sunnah is to study raw text. To study the Quran and Sunnah and to analyze it, you have to be an expert of the Arabic language. You have to have the usul al-fiqh, principles of usul al-fiqh, and know how to derive rulings. You have to have a certain number, a vast knowledge of hadith and Quran and the interpretation of Quran. These people who are able to do that are called mujtahids. The people that came after, very few people were qualified mujtahids to analyze the Quran and Sunnah and make their own judgment, because they lacked the qualifications. So that is why people didn't approach the Quran and Sunnah the way these earlier scholars did, because there aren't mujtahids, there aren't highly qualified scholars to analyze the text without the intermediate of a scholar's guidance, of a scholar's principles, and so on and so forth. And so so the scholars, when they studied, they would adopt a madhab, they would study it book by book by book. It was like a curriculum. And then they would learn all the rules of Sharia based on the interpretation of this imam. And then they would learn hadith separately, and usul separately, and all these other sciences, and they would have a comprehensive understanding of Islamic law based on the different sciences. And when they taught the masses, the general person just wants to know what's halal and haram. Right now, if I got into each discussion about every hadith and the possible interpretations of every hadith and how every scholar interpreted every hadith, I would leave you more confused than guided. You would probably be worse after that class than you would have been before it. Because you're like, you presented me with so much information, but I feel paralyzed by what you presented me. Right? We call that analysis paralysis. When you're presented with so much information, but that information is overwhelming. And you don't have the skills and the capability to analyze and dissect all this information. So what happens? You become paralyzed. You don't know what to do with this information. It's overwhelming. Right? So that's why the scholars, they didn't have this approach of like, teach you the hadith and let me give you all the opinions and so on and so forth, compare and contrast. It usually confused the masses. And so what they would do is they would teach a book of fiqh that has all the rules and laws, and this is what Ahlul Sunnah adopted. And so the scholars would adopt a madhab, and the community would follow their scholars. That is how it worked. The scholars would adopt a madhab so that they can understand the Islamic law, and then when they go to the community, they wouldn't go into the depths of Islamic law. They would give the community, hey, this is the basic halal haram, the do's and don'ts, what you got to do. Go do it this form. This has been approved by many generations of scholarship and studied and analyzed and reviewed and accepted by Ahlul Sunnah. It's a valid way of understanding Islamic law. Is that clear? That is how madhab became widespread. And so different scholars of different regions would teach different schools. They would teach different schools. So scholars of West Africa, there were many students that studied the Maliki school. And so eventually the Maliki school became very dominant. Government officials adopted it. Judges in courts also adopted it. And so they would, apply it in their rulings of court. And then it would be taught in the mosques. And so other madhabs would slowly die out because there isn't a great following. And that school would kind of be the primary school of that region. And that's how madhab became dominant. And so we studied the Shafi'i school because that's what I studied. It's really, there's no, that's what I studied and I learned, and so I studied the Shafi'i school. And so a person is free to study whatever school they want. It's your preference. A lot of what determines what school you study is what's available to you. What are the resources available to you? Right? That determines. If somebody says, I'm going to go study the Quran and Sunnah, you're most likely going to end up more confused than guided. And you're most likely going to have a false and incomplete understanding of Sharia, right? And so that is why we're studying the Shafi'i school and adopting this school. So if you studied with a different sheikh, you go on. So typically after this book, there's a curriculum you would learn. You would learn the Sifina. After the Sifina to Najah, you would learn a book called Matan Nabi Shuja'. After Matan Nabi Shuja', you would learn the commentary on Matan Nabi Shuja'. After that, there's a book called Umdat al-Salik. You would learn that, which is translated and available in English. It's like this, but a lot more detailed. And then you would go on. You would study maybe the Zubad, which is another book. And then you would go on to the Minhaj of Imam al-Nawawi, and then the commentary on the Minhaj. And so each book goes on. It takes this as kind of the basic text and then elaborates on it. If you study algebra, right, there's the basic formula, of algebra. And then as you go on, you study pre-cal and pre-cal 1, 2, calculus, so on. Everything is built on the foundation of what? Algebra. It's just expanding. That simple equation turns into a 3-4 page equation. Same thing here. That little section we read about the nullifiers of wudu, which was what? Maybe a paragraph, turns into a 4 or 5 page, kind of essay about nullifiers of wudu. They would talk about a lot of details that I'm not discussing now. How about if that happened? How about if this happened? How about if this and that comes? How about if you doubted your wudu? How about if you doubted if you had wudu, but or that you broke your wudu? How do you deal with doubt? How about if you had doubt during wudu? How about if you had doubt after wudu? How does that affect your wudu? All of these hypotheticals, right? And these things apply, these cases. And so you would learn all of these laws, all of these different rare scenarios. You would learn how scholars applied them to these rare circumstances. And so as you develop in the school, you learn these laws. And so that is kind of, this is an elementary level book. This is to give you at least the basic obligatory knowledge to fulfill your obligation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's going to teach you how to pray, the requirements, the wudu, the salah, the zakat, the saum. These are the basic minimum. If you want to increase, I definitely recommend you to seek the second level, third level book, and so on and so forth. And you're going to really gain a deep understanding of how Islamic law is interpreted and how it's applied to different cases and so on and so forth. And you've seen a lot of how we've applied this even as we speak now. I've given you guys many scenarios where I'm like, if this happens, then the ruling is this. But if that happens, the ruling changes to this. They will give you a lot more experience and a lot more analysis of how to apply these ahkam. And so for us right now, we're studying the Shafi'i law. For you to act upon it is sufficient. You fulfilled your obligation. As long as you follow a qualified school of Ahl Sunnah, khalas, that's sufficient. Any questions about madhabs? All right. And there is the school of those who say Quran, Sunnah, Quran, Sunnah. Of course, we all follow Quran, Sunnah, but by which means are you understanding the Quran, Sunnah, right? So we're all following Quran, Sunnah. To say that madhab isn't following the Quran, Sunnah is to be completely ignorant, because that's what the whole madhab is based on. It's based on Quran, Sunnah.
See, like madhab, right? Example, Imam Shafi'i say touch the woman, it's difficult, for us.
Mm-hmm.
Have to pick different madhab.
No, it depends. See, so generally you stick with your madhab, but if you yourself lack the resolve, to stick to the madhab, then you can take an easier opinion to make it easy for you. You're not doing this habitually, but this is you lack the discipline to do this, to stick to the madhab. Does that make sense? For example, we said the Shafi'i school says you need to make wudu every time you touch a woman, right? A woman that's non-mahram. And for those who missed that dars, you watch the dars. Shafi'i school, if you physically have skin-to-skin contact with a non-mahram adult woman, you have to make wudu, and that includes your wife. Your wife is not your mahram. So if a man touches his wife or a wife touches her husband, she has to make wudu, he has to make wudu. It's easy. To a lot of people, like, okay, just go make wudu. What's the problem? Do you understand? It's not a burden for some. Other people are like, man, I got to go to the bathroom every time. It's an inconvenience. I can't do that all. I want to take an easier opinion. Khalas, we're not going to burden you. Khalas, if you don't have the resolve, you can take an easier opinion. Do you understand what I'm saying? But it's not because the madhab is too hard to apply. It's just you lack the resolve to apply it. Does that make sense? So I give you guys masail because I know that generally people find these masail difficult. But if you were to go a generation ago, communities across the board applied this with no problems. And they were completely fine with it. Does that make sense? And so, yeah, so if you have the discipline, of course, follow it. That's what I would say. Stick to the madhab. But I know that, we have to realize, us, we always want to picture ourselves as the best Muslim. Like, I do everything absolutely. But we have to realize that, no, we're like elementary in Islam. We have to accept that we're like elementary in Islam. Because if we were the best Muslims, we would be praying tahajjud. We would have khushu' in our salah. We would be able to sacrifice our day and night for the sake of Allah. We would pursue sacred knowledge and expand our understanding. We would, subhanAllah, the sacrifices are so many. We would be in the remembrance of Allah every time we had free time. Not on our phones, not on watching TV, not socializing. Every moment we have would be devoted to Allah. But we lack that iman. We would all love to believe like I'm a great Muslim, but the truth is, we lack that iman. And that iman also, you can't just achieve it. You can't just achieve it. It takes years of development and knowledge and reflection and spiritual growth, right? And so I give you according to what is usually, people find difficult. Like, I don't want to overburden you. But it's not to say that this is like the standard. Does that make sense? That we can do better. So I give you guys according to what I find easy and acceptable and doable for the community. But if we want to increase our resolve, increase our iman, there's so much we can do. There's so much more we can do. And the best way generally is to stick to the madhab without getting out. That's generally the best preferred methodology of our school, is the scholars of all the 4 schools. They say don't shop from different schools. Try to stick to it. But if you do find one that is a mas'ala that's really hard for you, take it as an ease, not as the preferred option, but this is an ease. This is a rukhsa for you that's been given because of your inability, your lack, or whatever you lack, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I feel like with Westerners, we have this perception that like we're following Islam to the dot, like we've covered it all, and so we have to realize that we're barely touching the surface of Islam. Right? Like the way our scholars worshipped Allah and the way we worship Allah, there's a huge difference. There's a huge difference. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and it's not to say what we're doing is sinful. It's not to say what we're doing is sinful, but we just have to realize there are levels in the deen. There are levels in the deen. There are those whose hearts is with Allah all the time. And there are those who are just fulfilling the basic wajibat and obligations. And there are countless ranks in between. Right? So we have to realize, hey, I'm not all the way there. You know, and I have to, and so that's why part of fiqh is knowing yourself. Like Ramadan is coming. And I mentioned this last year, and I mentioned every Ramadan. You have to be a faqih of your own self. You have to know, what am I capable of doing? How many hours of sleep do I need to function? Right? Some people, they can function with 3 or 4 hours of sleep every day. They'll go to Taraweeh, they go to Tahajjud, read Quran, go to work, perform well. Other people, they can't function if they don't get 8, 9 hours of sleep. You have to know yourself. It's just, this is your limit. You have to know what you're capable of. And then you have to adopt Islam according to your capability. Does that make sense? Now, but then don't also mislead yourself and think, like, I'm going to be, we all want to be the best. But being the best, if you do it without wisdom, is like saying, I want to be the toughest guy at the gym. And you go into the gym, and you want to lift the heaviest plates and do the hardest workouts. What are you probably going to, you're going to injure yourself. If you want to be that toughest guy, the biggest guy, the macho and lifting, it's going to take you years of training. And you have to go under professionals. And same thing with Sharia and Islam. You want to be the most righteous Muslim? You're not going to do it just reading books or taking little courses, 1 hour here, 1 hour there. You're going to dedicate yourself years. You're going to study with a sheikh, have a spiritual mentor, have a guide, study the different sciences of Islam, study the science of purification of the self, character building, purifying the heart, fiqh, tafsir, hadith, know the seerah. You're going to commit yourself to reading 1 juz of Quran, 2 juz of Quran every day. Learn the meanings of the Quran. After, with that, make dhikr in the morning for an hour. You recite azkar, subhanallah, 1,000 times, Allahu Akbar 1,000 times. You make dua after every salah. You're raising your hand and pleading to Allah every salah. Even when you're silent, you're making dhikr of Allah. When you sleep, when you go to sleep, you sleep with them. As soon as you open your eyes, you wipe your eyes. You follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the dot. You wipe your eyes, you read some verses of the Quran, you praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you make wudu, you pray sunnah. After your sunnah, you make your azkar of the morning. Then you go to the masjid, you pray the sunnah again, and you pray fajr. After fajr, you make dua to the morning. It takes discipline, it takes commitment, it takes development. You're not just going to do that over the night. There was a scholar that recently passed, and I have his biography. I was just reading it, and his son is narrating how his father's schedule was, and it's amazing, it's so beautiful. He said, from the morning, my father wakes up, like I think it was a couple hours before Fajr. He wipes his eyes like the Prophet ﷺ used to do, recites some dua and verses, brushes his teeth, makes wudu, prays some raka'at of tahajjud, and then gets up goes to the masjid, prays sunnah in the masjid after Fajr, and then pray Fajr. He would pray every salah at the beginning of its time, and then after Fajr he would read about 5-6 pages of azkar, and then after that he would go to his library and study for extended amount of hours, and then he would go and serve his family, and then do, like, he mentioned this amazing lifestyle that the scholar had, right? You need a mentor like that to teach you how to be like that. You're not just going to be like that because you want to be like that. It takes development, it takes training, right? And so, just to kind of give us a perspective, because I feel like sometimes we lack that perspective, and we think ourselves to be the toughest guy, but we have to understand, like, know your place and adopt Islam according to what you can handle, and grow with Islam gradually. That's what Allah wants. Allah wants from us to strive and do our best according to what we can do. and to increase in knowledge and increase in iman as much as we can. Does that make sense? So I just want to provide that we have that awareness of how Islamic law is developed. We got into the other sides of the spiritual development, which I hope to teach in the future. There's a curriculum that talks about spiritual development. So inshallah, maybe in the future, we can talk about that and how do you get to these stages and how do you find a mentor and so on and so forth. The second mas'ala that I wanted to talk about before we start reading is the mas'ala of waking up another person for Fajr. Is it obligatory to wake up another person for Fajr Salah? The majority of our scholars say, no, you're not obligated to wake up anybody for Salah because the person who's sleeping is not responsible. Right? The person who's sleeping, they're not responsible for their actions while they're asleep. So if a person missed prayer because of sleep, there's no sin on you. There's no sin on them as well because they're asleep. Does that make sense? Unless they slept after the prayer time came in. They knew the prayer time came in and they slept and then they missed the prayer, then that person, you have to wake up for prayer. Does that make sense?
They went to sleep.
Huh?
Went to sleep every time.
They went to sleep after the prayer time came in. Then that person you have to wake up because they were awake when the command of prayer came in. Does that make sense? This is from the point of obligation. Now, it is actually recommended to wake them up. It is actually recommended to wake them up, but not obligatory. The reason it's not obligatory is because they're sleeping, and so they're not responsible. That's why it's not obligatory, according to the majority. So it is recommended to wake them up. And if you wake them up gently. Because again, they're not obligated, right? They're sleeping. So you wake them up gently. If they respond, great. If they don't respond, let them be. Some people, they shake them, pour water on them. You don't have to do all that. Wake them up gently. If they wake up, great. Teach them, motivate them with kindness. If they don't wake up, khalas. Just make sure after they wake up, you hold them accountable and make sure they make up their salah and so on and so forth. So that's just to encourage us to wake them up, but it isn't something that we have to enforce because there's no sin if they miss salah because of sleep. Okay, so I had one more other topic I want to talk about before we continue today's lesson, but I don't remember right now, so we'll continue. All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The author here, he's going to speak about the times of Salah. The times of Salah are 5. The times of Salah are 5. So Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, Subh. The Quran says that Salah has a prescribed time. Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. So Salah has a prescribed time. Salah was obligated in the Am al-Huzn, which I believe is the 10th year of Hijrah, the year of sorrow, when the Prophet ﷺ's uncle and wife passed away, Khadija, radiallahu anha. The Prophet ﷺ received the miracle of the Isra wal Mi'raj, the night journey and ascension, and so Salah was obligated. After the Salah was obligated and the Prophet ﷺ descended, Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet ﷺ. Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't receive instructions on how to pray. He was just given the command of prayer. So Jibreel alayhi salam came to him one day. He led him in prayer at the beginning of each salah. He led him dhuhr at the beginning of dhuhr, asr and he started with dhuhr. Dhuhr at the beginning of dhuhr, asr at the beginning of asr, maghrib at the beginning of maghrib, isha at the beginning of isha, and fajr at the beginning of fajr. And then the next day he came, he led him dhuhr at the end of dhuhr time, and asr at the end of asr time, maghrib at the end of maghrib time, isha at the end of isha time, and he told them these are the times of the prayer. And this you have to perform your prayer within this time. Is that clear? So the prayer time isn't a specific moment of the day, rather it is a window. The prayer time isn't a specific moment that you have to pray, it's a window. And Jibreel alayhi salam demonstrated. He said, here, you can pray right in the beginning as soon as the prayer time comes, or you can wait all the way to the end if you want to pray. You have that option. The preferred is the beginning, the earlier, the better. But it doesn't mean you have to. Right? So it's a window. It's a window, and praying early is a preference, not an obligation. So Jibreel alayhi salam demonstrated that for us through that event. And so from there, in other ahadith, our scholars deducted the prayer times. Traditionally, or based on Sharia, prayer times are based on the movement of the sun. The sun, we know that the earth orbits the sun. And so the movement of the sun is determining the prayer time. The sun rises from the east. What is the first glimpse of the sun that we get? It's called dawn, right? Dawn. It's when the first rays, right, of light come out. Right? You get these small rays of light are coming out. That's the beginning of dawn. Dawn continues until what? The sun rises. So that was sunrise, right? So you went from dawn, which were just rays of light coming out. You get more light. Now you got the entire sun is out. You got sunrise. And then the sun continues rising till it reaches the peak, which is called the zenith. It reaches its zenith. So it's ascending. It reaches the zenith. And then it starts descending, until it turns really yellowish, reddish before sunset. And then the sun sets. So the sun is gone now. It's hidden behind the horizon. But now you still got rays of sunlight that show. These rays of sunlight are red, and then the red rays go away, and then you get yellow twilight, and then you get white twilight, and then all the rays of the sun completely go away. Prayer time is based on the movement of the sun. It's literally when the sun goes here, when the sun goes there, when the sun goes here, when the sun goes here, when the sun goes. That's how prayer time is determined. It's determined based on the sun. And so up to the modernity where we have clocks and digital apps and so on calculating these things for us, classically, there would be somebody, go out, look. Cities didn't have lights, so now it's hard to even tell when dawn happens because there's so many lights. So you can't even tell, is it dawn or is it just the street light that I'm mistaken for dawn, right? And so traditionally, you would look at the sun. Today, we have apps that calculate things for us, and these apps have to be used wisely because if they're not used correctly or you use the wrong mathematics and so on, there's a lot of debate about the degree of Isha and Fajr. Which degree do you use, 15 degrees or 18 degrees, and so on and so forth. But the scholars generally, they permit the usage of time of these apps. And I believe the preferred degree is 15 degrees, and that's what ICNA uses for North America. We use 15 degrees. Some organizations use 18 degrees, I believe, to calculate their prayer times. And that leads, I believe, the prayer time to be a bit later than what we pray now. Or earlier, I forgot which one it is. But there's a different, but 15 degrees is, I think, what ICNA uses, and it's kind of the standard degree that we're using in the West right now, in North America at least. So that's how we calculate prayer times now, but we're going to go how it was originally calculated based on the ahadith and so on and so forth. So inshallah, we're going to read over that quickly. He says, rahimahullah, the time of dhuhr begins after the sun descends from its zenith. Right, the sun is at the zenith. Remember, that's the peak of the day. When the sun moves beyond the zenith, that's when dhuhr begins. That's when dhuhr begins. The sun starts going west, right? Dhuhr begins, and it ends when an object shadow equal its length, in addition to the length of its shadow at the time of zawal, which is the time of zenith. So just a summary is that when the shadow of an object reaches its length, so let's say this is about a foot, the shadow is about a foot, on top of any shadow it had at the time of the zenith. So an object sometimes will have a shadow based on its position on the earth and so on and so forth. You exclude that measurement. You look at the shadow of the object. If it's exactly 1 foot just like the object, then dhuhr has ended. So if you're camping or something, and let's say you don't have a watch and you're trying to calculate the time of prayer, that's how you would do it. You will look until the shadow, as soon as the object has a shadow, you would know that the dhuhr started, and then until the shadow becomes its length, dhuhr is over. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Asr begins at that time, right? The time of Asr begins when the object shadow equals its length. So now when this object shadow reaches 1 foot, Asr begins. In addition to the length of its shadow at the time of Zawal, and ends when the sun sets. So when the sun completely disappears in the horizon, that's the sunset. The sun is completely gone. We don't see no sun. We just see rays of light. That is Maghrib. Asr has ended. Maghrib begins, the time of Maghrib begins from sunset and ends with the disappearance of the red horizon. We said there are three horizons, and it's going to mention at the bottom. There are 3 twilights after the sun sets: red, yellow, white. Isha enters, according to the majority, when the red twilight disappears. And so Isha enters. Isha enters at that time. And then he says the time of Isha begins from the setting of the red horizon, and it ends at the Subh Sadiq. Subh Sadiq means true dawn, meaning when the actual first light of dawn comes out. And so Isha time, contrary to other school, like the Hanbali school, I think they say Isha is till like midnight. In the Shafi'i school, Isha is till Fajr. From Isha, which is tonight, Isha is at 7:30 p.m., Fajr is at 5:06. So you have from 7:30 p.m. to 5:06, that is your window to pray Isha. That is your window to pray Isha. The Hanbali school, they say up to midnight. They say you don't go beyond midnight. I don't know what other schools have that. They say Isha is not allowed beyond midnight. So those are 2 positions, but the position that I know, and I've known my entire life, is that this is until Fajr, you can pray your Isha prayer. So one way this is beneficial is that during the summer, one brother, the way he did his prayer time, because summer we have to be creative in Seattle, right? Because Isha is at 11:30, Fajr is at between 3 and 5, right? So he would sleep immediately after Maghrib, wake up 15 minutes before Fajr, pray Isha, pray Fajr, and then sleep again. So he divided his sleep into 2 halves. So one half was from Maghrib time to a little before Fajr. So about 9:30 till about 2:45. Right? So he's getting, what is that, about 5 hours of sleep? Right? He's getting about 5 hours of sleep, get up, pray Isha at the end of his time, then pray Fajr, and then go to sleep at about 3:30 until 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. till his work schedule. So he sleeps 5 hours in the first half of the night, 3-4 hours in the second half or the morning, and that's how he made his prayer schedule, which is very wise. And he did this under the guidance of scholars. They're like, this is better. So that's an option. That's an option. You could also do this if you have a busy day at work. You can use this. Let's say you're working during Dhuhr and you're really busy, and Asr doesn't come until 3:30. So you can wait till 3:15, pray Dhuhr at 3:20, and then wait till Asr comes in at 3:30, then pray Asr right after, and then go back to work. If you have a tight schedule, you don't really have the time to take prayer times off, whatever the reason is, whatever the circumstance is, Sharia has given you this option, right? You're not feeling well, you're just going to wait, and then just pray both prayers right back to back. You're going to pray the first at the end of its time, the second at the beginning of its time. It's allowed. It's allowed. The Madhahib have mentioned this classically. So knowing these prayer times is important because you have to be a faqih. Each one of us has to be a faqih of our circumstances and know what we can do and what we're capable of doing and how hard our situation is. And then we apply, we use this knowledge to obey Allah in a way that is Sharia compliant. We don't just say, I'm going to skip Dhuhr today. See, that's not Sharia compliant. You just decided to just disobey Allah because of your circumstance. So you have to use the guidance Allah has given you so that you're using the laws Allah has given you, you're not sinning. But you're still able to fulfill your needs and wants without compromising your deen. Is that helpful? All right. When we get to combining prayer, we'll talk about how about the option of combining prayer, because I know we have that fatwa as well, and it's adopted by some of our masajid here in our state. So how do we deal with those issues and combining prayer during the summertime and when the prayers are, really stretched out? So we'll get to that, inshallah. But for now, do you guys understand how the prayer times work? The apps are sufficient. You can just use it. Make sure you're using the ICNA calculation. Follow Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali school, the majority timings. That's khalas, sufficient. Is that sufficient? And then understand that prayer time is a window and not a set moment that has to be prayed. So within that window, you're good. The earlier you pray, the better, but it is not mandatory. And praying with congregation is better. Praying with congregation is 27 times better than praying by yourself. So if you just get your friend, your roommate, your brother, your son, your wife, whoever, 27 times more reward to pray with that individual. It doesn't have to be in the masjid. With that individual, it's better for you. It's equivalent to you praying 27 times by yourself. So we should pursue that. The scholar said Hypothetical issues, they say, how about if you have a conflict? Either you pray at the beginning of the time or you pray late but with another person. Which one is better? Some said, no, pray at the beginning. Others said, no, wait till you pray in congregation. So it's that important. So beginning of the time is highly virtuous. Praying in congregation is highly virtuous. If you can do both, great. If you can do either, do it. And if you have to pick between the two, that situation, you look at what is most doable for you, what is most feasible. Praying early, then take that ajr. Waiting, then take the jama'ah. La bas. Yes, brother?
How about Maghrib? The window the same, like 1 hour or 2 hours?
Exactly. The window is the same. So Maghrib time comes in at 6:09 p.m. tonight, and Isha comes in at 7:33. So you have from 6:09 to 7:33. From 6:09 to, so the same with Maghrib, and that's the majority opinion. There is an opinion that says that Maghrib is is a moment, it's a brief moment. That's a very minority opinion. The majority opinion is that window Maghrib has a window as well, and that window is from 6:09 to 7:33. I'm not encouraging you to delay your prayers. But I'm telling you that Allah has given you this for a reason. Circumstances happen, right? So you have to know these options so you know how to apply it to your circumstance. Does that make sense? No.
I had a situation. What if, like, my wife didn't want to pray on a hard surface,
Yep.
so she wanted to wait, and I just went and did Salah. So what do we do in that situation?
So missing prayer because of discomfort,
Right.
I don't see that as, I mean, I have to know how bad if it's like a condition or, if it's causing her pain or something of that sort, I mean, that's one thing, right? If she's pregnant and she can't pray physically on the floor, I mean, if she can't, because the question is, can she pray or is it a matter of preference?
I think it was a matter of preference.
Yeah, because if you're pregnant, you're still able. I mean, well, it depends on how far you're down the pregnancy, how hard your pregnancy is. Some pregnant women just pray on a chair the entire time of their pregnancy or a significant time of their pregnancy. And other women pray standing normally. So I'm not going to generalize and say it's one ruling across the board. But if it's a matter of preference, she's able to pray standing at home, but for whatever reason, maybe when she's at work, she's like, I don't want to pray on the work floor.
But we were out and about.
If you're out and about, so this is an issue. How do you make salah in public places, right? Just kind of like you're at a restaurant or, the mall or something of that sort. Generally what I do is I will look for a prayer area before I go to a market. And I will pray and then go out to the market so that I don't have to worry about my salah. But you can't always get that option. Other times, I try to find nearby musallas. Like I know in Kent, in our community, the halal store in Kent, International Bazaar, has a musalla. So if I'm in that area, I'll just go stop by the halal store and I'll pray real quick and go, right? So down a hill, there's a little musalla right outside, So I try to know my location and know what places I have that I can pray. If I don't have either or, and let's say I'm at the mall, I usually go to the family restroom or the fitting rooms, and try on the clothes. You didn't break no company rule, right? It's fine. Grab a shirt and go in and, try on the shirt and pray your salah and go about your life. You didn't do nothing wrong, right? You made your salah. Family rooms usually have private rooms. I go in there with your family, especially with your wife, you go make your salah. So that's generally my, approach to those masail. If it is extremely difficult and you really can't find anywhere, and maybe it's raining and the floor is wet, and it's a real burden, it's a serious burden, then in that circumstance I would say, if it's Maghrib, you can delay Maghrib and combine with Isha. And if it's Dhuhr, you can delay Dhuhr and combine with Asr. If it's Dhuhr though, or Maghrib. If it's Asr, stop what you're doing and go pray Asr. If you can't stop what you're doing and it is not possible, pray in your current circumstance and make up the prayer. You cannot delay Asr past its time. And you cannot delay Isha past its time and Fajr past its time. The two prayers you can push around is Dhuhr and Maghrib. Does that make sense? You can delay Dhuhr. In extreme circumstances, you can delay Dhuhr. And this isn't the Shafi'i opinion. Shafi'i opinion doesn't allow for extreme circumstance. They allow for illness, travel, rain. But I'm adopting another opinion that says for difficult circumstances, you can combine. But which ones are you combining? Dhuhr to Asr and Maghrib to Isha. Does that clarify? Does that help with the question? And you guide her. Remember how we said a person's iman? Give her the easier opinion. Tell her, okay, if it's hard, don't abandon your salah, don't neglect it. Tell her, if it's dhuhr, tell her just delay dhuhr till asr time and combine. Right? If it's maghrib, okay, we're going to delay maghrib till isha time and combine. Give her an easier opinion, right? Because that requires fiqh too, because as a leader, our scholars, they say a scholar is one who makes the deen easy for the people.
I just told her pray in the car.
But then that has to be made up. So she can pray in the car. If that's the situation, then she just makes up that prayer. That's fine. She prays in the car and she makes up that prayer. And that's okay too. And that's a valid position as well. So alhamdulillah, you handled it well. I think that was a good solution on condition that it's made up. Karana, I think, and then Andrew. Andrew, okay.
I was talking with one brother, if you miss a prayer, for example, it's kind of like a debt you have to pay.
Yes.
At some point, like for instance, if I miss like Asr on Tuesday, I make a note.
Yep.
That this needs to be made up as something.
Absolutely correct. Okay. Yep. Salah is a debt that has to be paid. Think of it, Allah has given you 24 hours to live, you give 5 salah. Right? It's very little. And those 5 salah are in your benefit. Subhanallah, right? So it is a debt that you have to pay. You can't just be like, I made tawbah and Allah forgive me. You have to repay the salah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why sometimes I like to write what prayers I've done. And if I did miss a prayer, to write, or record on my phone or whatever, to
Yep.
know at some point my niyyah is to make sure,
That you're making the
obligations met, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It makes complete sense. And so yes, you're doing it correctly. The only question is, are we missing salah with a valid excuse or not valid excuse? There are reasons that are valid. Just make sure you're adopting a valid reason, not without a valid reason. Does that make sense? If you miss because of forgetfulness, sleep, fine. If you miss because your circumstances don't allow you, pray as you are and make it up. Does that make sense? So just make sure you're doing it with the proper method. Even if that means praying in your car. Just pray and then make it up. If you have no way, and if you can combine, and you've exhausted your means. And again, I rarely find this, I've never had a situation where I actually missed a salah. I've never had a situation where I actually missed a salah. Like, there's masajid where, if you live in Seattle at least, or in our and over the United States generally, any major city has masajid. Or has a musalla, or has a parking lot. Has a little corner, you can go pull out your rug and pray. So I really find it to be like, I can't pray at all. I see that very hard to accept. It may be for women, of course, because of safety reasons. I wouldn't tell a woman, go pray in a parking lot like I would tell a man, right? So for a woman, you would say, if you really have no availability, combine. If you don't want to combine, pray as is and make up the salah. Right, so for women, you could make that, but again, pray as is and combine, or pray as is and make up the salah. But you just don't, in good conscience, say, I'm just going to skip salah. Because I can't, that's, sharia with salah is so important. There's never a circumstance where you can simply opt out of praying. If you're in war and you're in the middle of battle, you got to pray. If you're on your deathbed and you're dying, you got to pray. It's not something that is negotiable. The salah is the greatest obligation of Islam. After shahada is salah. But Allah is merciful, and He doesn't burden you more than you can bear. And He doesn't make it hard for you. Just use the guidance Allah has given you. You have no way, pray with your heart. Pray with your mind. Pray with your finger. Move your eyes. Pray without wudu. Don't face the qibla. But you have to pray. You have to connect. That daily link with Allah is our strength. We cannot lose it. Do you guys see the importance of it? We cannot lose our daily connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what makes us different from all other religions and faiths. We don't compromise our relationship with Allah. We don't compromise it for any reason. So you maintain it, but you maintain it according to your circumstance. Does that help and clarify kind of just how to apply it, right? Do your best, but don't compromise your salah. Don't give up your salah in totality. Yes, brother.
What if you're in a place that the sun doesn't set?
Alhamdulillah, we're not in that situation. Those are some complicated issues.
Let's say you're in northern, Norway, right?
Yeah.
And during
I would say consult the scholars of that region. That would be my advice. Consult the scholars of that region and let them deal with that issue. Alhamdulillah, we don't have to worry about that. We have a challenge here because Isha is late in the summer and Fajr is really early. So we do have our own challenge, but that one doesn't apply. So I would say consult the scholars of that region. Inshallah. Let's move on. He says here, rahimahullah, there are 3 types of horizons, red, yellow, and white. The red horizon is at the time of Maghrib, while the yellow and white are at the time of Isha. It is sunnah to delay the salah of Isha till the yellow and white horizons disappear. Is that clear? So our prayer times are based on the red horizon. Our prayer times are based on the red horizon. But it is better to delay it beyond the beginning time of Isha by maybe 20 minutes or so, and then to pray Isha. That's the better preference. All right, he says, rahimahullah, there are 5 times in a day, in a day during which it is haram to offer those salahs which do not have an immediate or preceding cause. So the sunnah salah, there are 3 types of prayer. Prayers fall into 3 categories. Obligatory prayers, sunnah prayers that have a set time or cause. Sunnah prayers that have a set time, like the sunnah of Fajr, the sunnah of Dhuhr, the sunnah of Maghrib, sunnah of Isha. They have a set time. Or a cause like the sunnah of wudu, the sunnah of entering the masjid. Is that clear? These are sunnahs that have a set cause or time. And there are sunnahs that have no cause or time. You're just praying a sunnah prayer. No specific reason. You get up right now, you want to pray sunnah. As much as you want. Some of our predecessors, they used to pray 300 raka'ah a day, 400 raka'ah a day. It was like when I talk about these righteous people, this is the level of worship we're talking about. Right? They're making sujood for an hour. Make sujood one, like I remember Abdullah bin Zubayr, he made sujood from the time of Maghrib until Isha. And not because he was burdened. He was so into his prayer, he lost track of time. Us, we're counting the minutes and seconds in prayer. Look at our difference, right? Like these, our scholars, our predecessors, these righteous people, when we speak of them, I mean, it's like you're thinking you're reading fairy tales, but they were real people. And their level of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to that extent that they would worship Allah so much, and their knowledge of Allah was so great, and their realization of this knowledge was so immense that they would get lost in salah to the point they could make sujood for an entire hour, hour and a half, and not realize that that time has passed. We do that with TV shows and video games, right? And for salah, we're counting the minutes and seconds, subhanAllah, right? So we really have to know these heroes we're looking up to. We got to make a lot of istighfar, right? That Allah forgive us and guide us, right? And so, going back, there are 3 sunnah. There are 3 types of prayer. Obligatory salahs. We have the salahs with set time or cause, and we have salah that have no specific cause or time. You're just praying extra salah. He's saying here, there are 5 times where it is haram to pray a salah without any cause or time. These are just general sunnahs. There are 5 times. Everything else you can pray. Does that make sense? The sunnah of wudu, you can pray any time of the day. The sunnah of when you enter the masjid, you pray any time of the day. Does that make sense? But if it doesn't have no cause, then there are 5 times you don't pray. You don't just say, I want to do extra sunnah. You're like, what sunnah are you doing? I just want to pray. You can't pray these times. Does that make sense? You can't pray these times. No, you don't. Don't pray now. What are these 5 times? Number 1, at the time of sunrise until the sun rises to the extent of the height of a spear. So the sunrise is at 6:30. 6:30. The sun rises at 6:30. So once the sun rises, until the sun rises the height of a spear, which is estimated to be between 15 to 20 minutes. You don't pray any salah. That is general. You know the duha prayer? You don't pray it until 20 minutes after sunrise. There's a common mistake, and be careful. Do not pray your duha prayer at sunrise. Pray your duha prayer 20 minutes after sunrise. And you have all the way till the zenith to pray your duha prayer. All right, so that's a mistake I see brothers make. They'll say as soon as the sun rises at 6:30, I'm going to pray my duha prayer. No, brother, don't do that. That's not permissible. That's not permissible. You got to wait till the 20 minutes after the sunrise. So number 1. Number 2, at the time when the sun is at its zenith. What do we say the zenith is? The sun is at its highest point, right? Until it declines. So the sun is at its highest point, you don't pray any salah at that time. So that's about 15 minutes before dhuhr, roughly. So you don't pray any sunnah, general sunnah, 15 minutes before dhuhr until the time of dhuhr. So about 10, 15 minutes roughly. You don't pray sunnah before, you don't pray general sunnahs before dhuhr. And then number 3, at the time, except on Fridays. And then number 3, he says, at the time the sun becomes yellow, pale, until sunset. So the yellowish sun is right like an hour before sunset, right? When the sun is really reddish, yellowish, hot yellow, right? When you see that red, like yellowish sun, strong yellow sun, you don't pray any general sunnah. Number 4, he says after subh salah until sunrise. What's the subh salah, fellas? Fajr. Right, subh means morning, dawn. So you don't pray the subh salah after fajr, you don't pray any general sunnah. You can make up a sunnah because that has a cause. But you don't just pray a general sunnah. You're like, I just want to pray extra sunnahs after fajr salah. No. Make up your sunnah, read Quran, make dhikr, but you don't pray extra sunnahs. Make sense? And then number 5, after asr salah until sunset. So the last 2 have to do with the action. The first 3 have to do with the time. Does that make sense? They overlap in some of these, in the asr time one. So, but 2 have to do with time, 2 have to do with the sunset. Any questions about that? Fair?
Can you break down number 2? What means except on a Friday?
Yeah, so you can pray sunnah at the zenith time on a Friday. If you wanted to come before Jum'ah, like the adhan of Jum'ah is 12:19, right? You come at 12 o'clock and you just want to pray some sunnahs before Jum'ah, it's okay. You want to, it's ibadah. Only Jum'ah, no other day. So you want to come before Jum'ah and you're like, I want to pray 10 rak'ahs before Jum'ah, quickly. Why not? You have some time. We have to teach ourselves to not just wait for Salah to come to us, but we go to Salah. Right? So this is some of the way of our scholars, right? Our predecessors. You had another question?
I remember hearing about that a while ago. I don't know if it's true or not, but they said like that's because those are usually the times when people who worship the sun.
Yeah, they're usually like sun worshippers would pray at those times. So that's part of the wisdom. That's part of the wisdom behind it. Yes. Even like, our scholars, they said we don't resemble ourselves to like, mushrikeen. I remember like Imam Nabi, I read, he said, when you pray with a sutra, you put something in front of you, don't put it straight in front of you, like to the point that one would assume you're praying to it, because that resembles the way of the mushrikeen. Place it to the side of you a bit. So that it's not an object you're praying to, so that you're not doing it, but that resemblance is not there. So you place it a little bit to the side. So our scholars always emphasize that. If something resembles the practices of mushrikeen, distinguish yourself a little bit. Don't do what they do. Does that make sense? Yes, so that's correct. That's part of the wisdom. That it was times the mushriks would pray to the sun, and so we distinguish ourselves from them by not praying at those times. Any other questions? Are we good on the prayer times? All right. Here, these masail are pretty brief and short. He says, rahimahullah, the pauses in salah are 6. The pauses in salah are 6. And so here, he's going to give us 6 pauses, which I'll read briefly and then I'll comment on, inshallah. He says, between takbirat al-ihram and dua iftitah. So takbirat al-ihram is the opening takbir. Allahu Akbar. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. There should be a pause between Allahu Akbar and the opening dua. Is that clear? A pause, a brief pause. And then the second pause is after dua iftitah and a'udhu billah, ta'awwad. You say, Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik, wa tabarak ismuk, wa ta'ala jadduk, wa la ilaha ghayruk. Pause. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Pause. And then another pause, number 4. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The Prophet ﷺ used to have short pauses between ayat, so to reflect on their meanings. So that's also a sunnah. Number 5, between the completion of Fatiha and Ameen. Waladdallin. Ameen. Sometimes you hear Imams, Waladdallin. Ameen. That's not appropriate for an Imam. Especially as a leader, you want to display the sunnah and calmness in your salah and tranquility in your salah. So no hastiness. And that is for everybody, but especially the Imam, because he's setting an example. And then number 5, between Ameen and the surah. Right? Ameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And move on. Number 6, between the surah and ruku'. You read Fatiha, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ, or Ikhlas, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. Allahu Akbar. Right? Sometimes we see brothers, they're praying salah. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ. Allahu Akbar. The hands are already going up. That's not appropriate. It's not haram. But we're learning the best form to pray the salah. Wait, finish your surah. Where are you running? All right? Take your time, finish your surah, and then go pray. And subhanAllah, I want to talk about the importance of mindfulness and concentration in salah. With salah, it's very easy to go on autopilot. It's natural human behavior. Natural human thinking is what? When you repeat something, your mind learns it, adopts it, and puts you in autopilot when you do it to save you energy. Right? Because thinking is energy. So your mind, Allah equipped you with this so that you adapt to your circumstance. So what that happens is, it happens also during important things. And that's where we have to break our human behavior. Don't let your mind go into autopilot in salah. Teach yourself to be mindful, have concentration, and think about what you are reading. That's the beginning. We're not talking about crying and weeping and fear and love. That's advanced salah. The first beginning of salah, the elementary level of salah is, let me just concentrate and reflect a little bit on what I'm reciting. And then from there you build up. Now you have deeper meanings, and now emotions are coming up, and now fear and love and tears. That's down the road. You have to develop that, right? So we want to teach ourselves when we pray our salah. Sadly, subhanAllah, we see it around the world, and Muslims, subhanAllah, may Allah forgive us. We're human beings and we have our flaws. And we see the generations, each generation is just becoming less and less, has less and less resolve and commitment to the deen, And this generation also, one of the fitan of our generation is that people think they are the best Muslims when they are really very elementary in their Islam, right? Everybody wants to be a champion of Quran and Sunnah, but they don't know how to act and have akhlaq, And so this is a fitan of our time. We see so many people becoming champions of the deen, but they don't even know how to practice the deen. Their character contradicts the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Their speech, their dhikr of Allah is minimum. What Islam are you practicing? Because this wasn't the Islam of the Sahaba, nor the Islam of the early generations. This is a fitna of our time. But going back to salah, we want to learn, first of all, to be calm. Calmness. Get rid of hastiness. The Prophet said, when you come to salah, don't come hasty. Don't rush. Don't speed walk. Don't come, you're breathing hard, your heart is... Calm down when you come to salah. Step one, come to salah calm, in a calm fashion. You missed a rak'ah. What did you lose? You're going to add the rak'ah. Bismillah, it's fine. Right? It's the hastiness of a human being. Allah made us hasty. Right? خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ مِنْ عَجَلٍ. So come to salah calm. And come to salah clean. And then concentrate. Try to concentrate on what you are reading. Take your time with your words and make your voice beautiful. Because once you start making it beautiful, you're going to start to experience emotion. That's why when the more, and so expressing voice is a way of activating our emotions, right? Stimulating our emotions. You start to experience some types of feeling, right? So concentrate, take your time, make your dhikr beautiful, and of course don't make it too long to the point you get bored as well. Right? Because if you make things too long and you make recitation super, extended too long, it can lead to boredom. So you have to also be aware of yourself. Right? Some scholars, they read the Quran super slow and they enjoy that. And somebody might pray like that and they're yawning and ready to fall asleep. So you have to know yourself and what type of speed you need to focus in your salah. So that's just some general tips on improving our focus in salah. There's a book that I hope to teach in the near future, which will talk about how to concentrate in salah. It will give you a step-by-step instruction about what you should think of at every moment of the salah. If you want to purchase it, you can now. It's called Purifying the Soul by Saeed Hawa. I really love that book. It's the summary of Imam Ghazali's book. It's a green book. If you Google it, you'll find it. It's a green cover. The English print is in green. Purifying the Soul. Or a concise summary on purifying the soul. I think something like that. The author is Saeed Hawa. Say Saeedhawa. So purchase that book. He gives you a step-by-step breakdown of how to be mindful in salah according to the Ihya of Imam Ghazali, rahmatullahi alayhima. All right, and then the last part of this that I want to speak about, and inshallah we'll conclude tomorrow night, we'll get into the sujood of forgetfulness and some of the other parts of salah, inshallah. He said there are 4 postures in which Tuma'ninah is required. It's compulsory. Tuma'ninah is to have composure, to have composure in salah. So there are 4 times where you have to have composure in salah. In ruku', you have to be ruku' for a moment where all your limbs settle. In i'tidal, when you straighten up. In sajda, when you're in sujood. And while sitting between the 2 sajdas. You have to have tuma'ninah, composure. He defines composure on page 65. He says, Tuma'ninah, composure, is a pause after movements to such an extent that every limb remains in its place for the duration of reciting Subhanallah. So you go to ruku', Allahu Akbar, Sami Allah. There has to be a moment of composure in ruku'. Does that make sense? Beyond the zikr, you have to have a moment of composure. It is obligatory for the validity of salah. And then and here I want to comment on this last mas'ala, and then inshallah we'll conclude for the night. If you come to the masjid and the imam is in ruku', for your rak'ah to count, you and the imam must be in the ruku' simultaneously and with a moment long enough for you to have composure. Does that make sense? So, the imam is in ruku', I'm coming to ruku'. I say, first of all, you have to say Allahu Akbar. Remember, you can't say Allahu Akbar going to ruku'. Takbirat al-ihram has to be done during the position of standing. A lot of people make this mistake. They want to catch the imam. They're hasty. Allahu Akbar. You said your takbirat al-ihram, part of you were moving down as you were making takbirat al-ihram. Does that make sense? That invalidates your salah. Because takbirat al-ihram, the entire duration of takbirat al-ihram has to be said in a standing position. Is that clear? The entire duration of takbirat al-ihram has to be said in a standing position. So you say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Then you go for ruku'. So that is a common mistake I see, especially young folks. You know, Ramadan, they'll wait till the imam finishes the Quran, and then as soon as he goes to ruku', they'll run and try to catch the ruku'. You know, they're young, may Allah, guide them, and alhamdulillah, they're in the masjid and praying. So, but they do that. So we have to tell them, listen, use fiqh when you do that. Even if you're going to do that, apply it correctly, right? Wait, make sure that when you do that first, you make takbirat al-ihram. And then you make your takbirah to go down. And when you go down, you and the imam must be in ruku' simultaneously long enough for you to have composure. If you're going down as he's going up, or you go down and he goes up right away, that rak'ah does not count. I've seen adults and I've seen youth do this both. The imam has gone down, but as soon the person goes down, but as soon as they're going down, the imam is rising. It doesn't count. It doesn't count. The rak'ah doesn't count. You and the imam must be in that ruku' simultaneously, long enough for you to have composure, to have tuma'ninah, for the rak'ah to count. Otherwise, you just add the rak'ah at the end, and there's no loss. You say rak'ah is 2-3 minutes. If you're hasty, maybe even a minute. So there's no reason to mess up your salah and so on because of hastiness, inshallah. Any final questions before we conclude? I think the dars is clear. Yeah, the times of, right? Yeah.
So, when the muhtar of the Maghrib ends, is it about maybe 30 minutes after? Because one time I observed that reddish stuff left of the sun, it didn't go in till about 30 minutes later.
I don't recall the exact terminologies. I think in the I can review it, but right now I don't recall. So the scholars they record the preference and they grade it to like different ranks. So they say if you pray within like the first like 20 minutes, like the time of adhan, wudu, sunnah, and then iqamah, that's like the best time. And then after that, they give it a rank. And then after that, to the middle is a third rank. And then after that, beyond the middle is a fourth. So they give it different ranks based on the time, the window of prayer time. I don't recall all the terminologies on that. So let me revise that. And then inshallah, I can bring that up tomorrow night. And that can be our introduction to tomorrow's dars.
Because my situation at work,
Yes.
they give me time to pray, but they can't, since the time is moving, so I have to adapt. Like, for example, Maghrib, I have to wait 7.
That's fine.
So
Yeah.
it's something like that.
Yeah, that's fine. Because, again, we're not in a Muslim society. And a lot of times, there's workflow, there's a schedule. And so, and so for non-Muslims, they're not planning. And so when you go to pray, it does oftentimes interfere with the work schedule and the flow of work, right? So we have to be respectful and considerate and understand that they're not part of our faith and this is not part of their schedule. So, and alhamdulillah, Sharia didn't make Salah a set moment of the day, rather a window, right? So we show respect. We appreciate the privilege of making our Salah. And so we just pray a bit late. And that is a greater fadl. In that case, it's actually more virtuous. Why? You have an obligation towards your employer. So you are leaving a sunnah for an obligation. Right? Because your obligation is to honor your work contract. The sunnah is to pray the salah at the beginning of its time. So you're leaving a sunnah for an obligation. So in this situation, you are doing the deed that is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to Sharia. Does that make sense, you see? So we have to have this fiqh. That's why having understanding and knowing how to apply the deen, it requires, it requires really practical knowledge, right? Because if you just have hypothetical knowledge, then you end up, doing sometimes more damage to yourself and others than benefit, right? So in that situation, your greater wajib is your work. As long as you're praying before Isha, which Isha is 7:33, you're okay. So if your employer says, hey, 7 o'clock, you can go pray, there's a break time, or whatever the work slows down, or whatever the cause might be, or there's somebody that's going to cover you, or your manager says, hey, I'm going to be available to cover you for 20 minutes during that time. Okay, khalas. He's working or she's working with you, so you work with them and, fulfill both your obligation to your employer as well as the obligation of salah, right?
I used to pray on the hallways outside. Now they let me use the conference room.
Yeah. And also advocate for yourself. Like legally, you're entitled to a prayer, to your freedom of religion, right? And they have to accommodate you to the best of their capability, right? So, but that requires advocacy. You don't have to pray in hallways. You don't have to pray in parking lots, or your job especially, right? In public places it's different, but your job has to accommodate you. And so as Muslims, but the problem I see is oftentimes Muslims, they'll come and they're like, hey, I don't pray till I go home. And I'm like, no, they're going to give you a place of prayer. You just have to advocate for yourself. Just have a little bit of courage to make that request, right? So as Muslims, we have to have advocates, because they're not going to give us our rights. There's a story I'm going to share briefly. A brother that I know, he shared recently that one of the airports consulted him about a prayer space for Muslims. And so he told them, listen, you need to make a prayer space. You got to make sure the entrance of the women is separate than the entrance of the men. You need to make a restroom for them that has this proper istinja. You need to the restroom also have to have a place for wudu. He said they gave me an opportunity to take part in a development of a prayer space. So he said, I went all out. He said, I went all out. I need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. And so he said, okay, when we hire our design team, we'll have you as an advisor to the design team. Right? So, but that requires advocacy. He would have never done that. And the community wouldn't have that prayer space in that, I don't know I think it's in Oregon if I'm not mistaken. But the community would not have that prayer space at that airport if he didn't advocate. If a student, when they go to their school, they don't tell them, I need a place to pray for 5 minutes between this window time. They're going to accommodate you, but if you don't go and speak, and if a parent doesn't advocate for their child and teach the child how to advocate, when are we going to find accommodation? Right? So we have to, advocacy is very, very important. White folks, they know how to speak. They'll ask for A, B, C, X, Y, Z. They want every right they have, every resources. Muslims, we're just like, listen, I just need to get through. Let me get by. I don't want no headache. Bismillah, let me get out, right? They don't know anything. Leave us alone. No, advocate for yourself. You have rights, and there are resources available. So we really, even when I teach my students, and this came up today, I was teaching them, they will give you a prayer space. I don't know any school that has rejected a prayer space or a job that has refused to give prayer space. But I know countless Muslims who are lacking the courage and skills to advocate. So a lot of the blame is the lack of advocacy, the lack of, using our voice and speaking up. So inshallah, and I know you have it, but I just want to use that as an opportunity to encourage others, like, hey, advocate for yourself. You will get what you want, but be reasonable. And within the limits of Sharia, don't try to use that to take advantage of people's kindness as well, because we've seen Muslims do that as well, right? Go 5-minute prayers, taking half an hour. You're wondering, brother, what's going on, right? And then the job says, okay, no more salah for you Muslims, or the school says no more salah. Well, there's a reason. You abuse your privilege, right? So that also needs awareness as well, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakumullah khair wa barakallah feekum. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.